there is this thing right now that we have more time to address issues than to go to the next session. So what I would like to do right now is to call upon the stage speakers that had questions from the audience that are unanswered, like Matan and whoever else has any questions for other speakers, and we can address those. But I would like to also have somewhat of a collaborative, interactive session with you all and see what kind of discussion we can strive together in the topics that we have talked about in these sessions. So I know there was a question for Mathan coming from Alex that I couldn't let him say.
Well, Matan had a fantastic presentation, and I think that any technology that can embed incentives is very good. So my question for Matan is very simply to dive in. I don't know. It's a perhaps we have summoned a demon. this is you. Any of you read the book The Daemon and Freedom? Okay, if you haven't read it, you should do it. The daemon is being invoked. Okay, so and anyone who thinks that's funny, we should be good friends. So Matan, can you tell us about the?
We should be good friends.
Okay, good. Can you tell us about the incentives and how you build the incentives in? You started to tell me about Bitcoin, but said that there are other ones. Please elaborate.
Right. So basically what we've done is just to generalize the paradigm of Bitcoin in all possible directions. The idea is that this incentive is symbolized by a token. Each network has its own token. And, well, there are two tools. There's the token and there's the reputation. Or you can call the reputation an influence power. So the token is like the economic, financial shares, and the reputation is the governmental shares. And the incentive is based on distribution of those tokens and reputation. So in a project, in a network, participants can contribute in any way they wish. It's completely made of free agents. So you're contributing a code or a design or a one-pager or an idea, or you simply make people happy. You can also submit that as a contribution. And then if other people endorse that contribution, approve that you made them happy, for example, they can, it's kind of a mining, it's a new mining procedure. They can mint new tokens for your contribution. And then also new reputation score for your contribution.
Persisting demon.
Now the incentive comes from the fact that the same tokens that are being distributed in the early days to contributors are then required in order to enjoy the services or the products of that network. So they become from equity extrapolates to gas or subscription fee and so on. And it's also built in a way that the earlier you get reward for your contribution, the more value you get to reflect the risk. Maybe this is one opportunity to say everything that I just said is not about one particular protocol. We're actually mapping systematically the space, the infinite dimensional space of possible protocols that satisfy a list of requirements. And then there's a lot of freedom to choose your own protocol for your own application. For example, just an example, the paste of, I would say, degrading value from early to late is a freedom that you can encode in your society. You can decide how much more you want to reward early adopters with respect to late adopters. So this is a freedom that you can code into your system, for example. But there are many other such freedoms.
We have so many questions.
Thank you. I have a question concerning the reputation, because you said that early adopters, it basically is a system of first come, best serve. So my question is twofold. One, what if one of those first comers wants to do something inappropriate when they already have the reputation? Could they not pervert the system? And my second question is, what about upcoming generations that maybe might end up being braver, more intelligent, more brilliant, and so on, but the most eminent positions have already been acquired by those first comers? Thank you.
Right. So excellent questions. So first, you're asking me about resilience. So what make the system resilient to people that gain reputation to attack the system, to take it over, or just behave badly? So the whole point, this is the greatest challenge of this protocol. The whole point was to design a protocol which is fully resilient, which means, and it does, which means that as long as your agent doesn't have more than 50% of the reputation of that network, you cannot attack the system. You cannot. In fact, if someone that has reputation will try to bad behave on the system, he will simply lose his reputation and will not gain anything. So it's designed in that way. That's the greatest requirement for that design. The second question, also very good. So just as I said, you can design the pace of like how earlier get more value than late, right? But then let's say that latecomers come and their actually value is really, really great because, I don't know, they're brilliant or whatnot. The point is that then the early comers can decide how much to reward the latecomers, right? In terms of tokens and reputation. Now, if the latecomers will feel that they are not properly rewarded, they can always just, with a click of a button, just fork the network and open their own new network where they are the majority of the reputation and token. And if their contribution is so much valuable, then the old ones will like to join the new ones. So in a sense, it's just a network of networks that's emerging and flowing so that everything can happen. So if you feel that if you are in the network and you feel that the network is not aligned with what you think is right, including the level of reward that you get, you're always free just to fork the network. So if there are enough people who are aligned together but disaligned with the existing network, they will simply fork it. It's an evolution of governance. It's evolution of economy. Yeah, process.
Hi, Martin. Thank you for your, outstanding presentation. Really mind-opening. So the question is, talking about hierarchy, let's say, even though it might seem tricky as a term to be used. So we have a theory that we have an input, an agent, no? Okay, who gives an input, which via signal communicates to the network, right? We are assuming that the agent is purely human, right? Have you a model?
Actually not.
Yeah. Have you a model to have a cognitive system, which is raised by the networks or connection of networks, which may be also proactive and not just handling a need or answering a question, but also be a judging element by itself, acting as a node, for example, with its own reputation, or by being proactive. So being an input agent by himself, by itself, I would say.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I understood correctly the question. I mean, if I understood correctly, that's exactly what we have. Any node can proactively contribute to the network.
Didn't explain very well. We are assuming that agents inputting signals are humans.
No, not at all. That's why I call them agent. Otherwise, I would call them humans. Okay. Agent, anything can be agent. I can have 10 agents, or 10 people can have one agent, or a decentralized network can be an agent of another decentralized network. In fact, this is if we get into details of the protocol, you see that this is actually a requirement. You'll see that what we have eventually is a graph of networks. I call them network of networks, where different networks are agent of different other networks. And they all work together, and they all have reputation in other networks. So yeah, exactly. And you can also have machines as agents, as long as the machines are in line. In fact, it's in a way artificial intelligence for society. But we're actually hybrid society machine. Ecosphere. Hybrid governance between humans, machines, and whatnot. Yeah.
So the question is...
last question, sorry.
The last question. We are assuming that any agent that interacts with the networks present in all the networks, is active. But what about the people that just connect but don't interact? I mean, in positive or negative way, that passive users.
Right. So you can call. So there are many ways to think about it, but you can call them just endpoint user, for example, just users that consume the product. Yeah. So what happens is that in terms of reputation, with respect to the active users, they are being constantly diluted. So they're losing their reputation to affect the system, and in terms of financial means, they will need to purchase the service. They will not get rewarded because they are not active. So this is. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So basically, it's this model extrapolates. So in a regular company, you have let's say founders, and you have investors, and then you have maybe early developers and late developers, and then early adopters, and then late adopters, and then users, endpoint users, right? In this model, there is no discrete division between those sectors. There is just one protocol, and everyone can participate as, to some extent, investors, to some extent, developer, to some extent, early user, or just endpoint user, and be rewarded or not rewarded accordingly.
Okay, so thank you for answering these last questions. And I know there are many more for Mathan and for all the speakers, but we just don't have time. The next session we are about to start is another panel discussion. So another interesting intersection of fields from different speakers or people of interest that we've had here. So let me welcome on stage Mathan Field, Luis Rey, Cristina Gabetti, and oh, of course, and Roberto Battaglia. I'm sorry, I wasn't forgetting you. And David would like to introduce the speakers.
So after the panel, we will go to closing. And just to give you an idea of what I expect from you, I want to tell you that none of them had any idea that they will be on the panel until 15 minutes ago. Okay?
True.
And that is so beautiful.
We believe you.
Because they are game. They are ready. They don't mind. And they are ready to make mistakes in front of all of you, in front of the entire world, because this is being streamed, this is being recorded, and that's fine. Because we don't know the answers. And how can we find a solution if we are not ready to find the path which will include necessarily mistakes? So they are a living witness to the fact that the courage of making mistakes can be shared regardless of the perceived power, regardless of the perceived need to be always having the right answers in your personal life or as the head of a given enterprise or a division, whether you are a CEO or as Mathan, or whether you are the head of a pretty large division like Roberto. How many people work for you, Roberto, just as a number, round number? 130. Okay, and how many hours of training do you deliver?
1.3 million training days per year.
Okay, so to repeat it for the streaming, there are over 130 people working for Roberto, and they deliver 1.3 million days of training per year, okay? And do you ever make mistakes in your division? They make a lot of mistakes. So the analogy that I came up with just before asking Christina to moderate this panel too, which also she didn't know, is that you know the law of gravitation, where intuitively we think that a large object should feel more gravity. Yes, but a large object has also a larger inertia. That is why it doesn't matter whether it is an apple or a cannonball, they will fall at the same speed. So it doesn't matter whether you have more resources. We think Google has infinite resources, or a bank like this has infinite resources. It feels the problems more strongly in proportion with its own resources. So it is everybody's responsibility to provide feedback, to provide intuition, to provide creativity for searchings for solutions. And so that is what will be happening at this panel. And I am very much looking forward to your conversation.
Thank you. Maybe just, you know, spontaneity is a big ingredient in this conversation, having known a few minutes ago, but it might be interesting, since we're engaging an online community as well, to see if, as we start on this theme, which is moving towards a new balance, there might be questions or feedback, and we already have one here in the room, yes?
It's possible. Well, apparently, for what I understood, because Nathan, are you from Israel, Nathan? Yeah, I just was assuming. I didn't understand perfectly all the English, but anyway, apparently Nathan and Roberto are exactly the zenith and azimuth. I mean, it's something like, right? And apparently they are in two worlds that are absolutely erasing one each other or the other one. I mean, even if it's Roberto, I assume he's a very nice person, but he represents exactly the bank.
But may I remind he's hosting us?
Yeah, exactly. He's hosting us beautifully. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. But I mean, Intesa Sanpaolo is one of the largest, or maybe the largest bank in Italy. Yeah, I think so. Unicredit, I don't know. Anyway, so he's proposing something. Yeah, he's proposing something. Is suggesting a dream of something that will become, that belongs only to people, no corporation. And you were designing in the beginning of your presentation that you are concerned also not to be just financial issues, but what is going on in the world. Exactly. So, if he succeeds, what happened to Intesa Sanpaolo? And if you fail, what happened to your company if a bank fails?
It's a really big question, and a really good question, because as I mentioned, we are observing and studying all these trends because we are aware that we are in the middle of the great big threats, because all is changing, and doing so, we are aware that we have on the one hand to be really open to be able to foresee the future, to have the courage to take a risk. On the other hand, we are aware that we are really regulated, because the word mistake for us is really a serious question. Because our regulators, that are more or less 6, 7 regulators, every day design and publish new policies, because we are dealing with not with the money that is a sort of commodity, but with the trust. And dealing with the trust means that we have to be really competent, really serious, really compliant, because compliance for us is really a big department, but a big question. For us, the real thing is how we can deal with these challenges, with this really difference between that type of approach compared to our approach, is to, first of all, working on the mindset and the culture of our people. Because taking risks means something really familiar for the bank, because we are not selling loans, we are buying risks, and we are competent in dealing with the risk, because we are doing a lot of things in terms of financial services. But on the other hand, we have to teach people, we have to open the mind of our people to take the risk in terms of entrepreneurial approach. And that means that doing this, we have to face this type of challenge. We have to be so able, so resilient, but so able to renounce the part of our revenues to open new roads, to open new possibilities. We are aware that it's really difficult because our regulator is really prudent about blockchain, Bitcoin, and so on. Bank of Italy are saying us, you have to not consider these things. But on the other hand, we are aware that this type of trends are unstoppable. And that's the reason why we are investing in that areas, because we are aware that that type of approach can destroy the financial system. This is one of the possibilities. We are studying, I don't know, the balancing between this type of approach and the potential consequences, and on the other hand, all the opportunities we can take advantage of. That means not only openness, but also new alliance with this type of subject. That means a completely breakthrough about our approach, because we are prudent, because we are risk averse, and we have to take the risk in the different ways. But the first thing is working on culture. That is not 1.3 million training days, because this is one of the things. We have to change the culture and the mindset using new approaches, using contamination, like this type of days we are living together. This is the thing. We can't foresee the future because we are aware that there are a lot of variables that we have to consider. But the most important thing is to go beyond. This is not an option today.
I'll slip in just with one quick question before we go on to Nathan. What tool, educational, motivational tool, has brought your group or your groups to really leap beyond in some area?
Not teaching people in a traditional way, but challenging them with real challenges we are working on. That's the best thing we are following. We are seeing not only to face this type of problem, but to find the new talents, to find the people that have the competence and the passion, the abilities to follow this path. That is not so easy, but that's the way. That means to reinvent all the way we use to deliver training, but on the other hand, the way we use not only to be the so-called HR business partner, but to become part of the business, to participate in the real objective we have, in the real vision of the company, and transforming some function of the techno-structure of the company, something really related to our customers, something really close to our stakeholders. That's the important thing.
Thank you. You're in a completely different, excuse the pun, but playing field. And be interesting to know you're instead emerging from a spontaneous, selection. And what's your perspective on that and in relation to the question?
Right. So first of all, I would like to emphasize that we are not...
Sorry, there's a mic open. There's no longer a mic open. Someone's having a conversation in the room. Okay. Uh-oh, watch out. Okay, over to you.
So I don't believe in destroying anything. We're not coming to destroy anything, not banks. Buckminster Fuller put that in a better way. He said that like the best way to replace an old system is not about breaking it, but rather just building a better system. So that is definitely our mindset. And even more than that, I would like to add that two things. Firstly, I believe that really making revolutions into a new paradigm requires relying on the old paradigm. So it's actually two-sided need that is in here. And secondly is that not only we want to build a better infrastructure, better paradigm, better operating system, we actually are interested also to build the bridge between the old and the new. If you make a phase transition which is so abrupt and forget building the bridges, no matter how much better the new phase is, you'll make too much of a disruption and too much of damage in that phase transition. So we are actually looking for smoothing out that phase transition by building bridges and collaborations between old system and new system. I think new system needs the old system in order to fuel that revolution. And I think the old system needs the new system in order not to be left behind. So actually there is a synergy in this relationship. And we, as well as many other groups of this kind, are in touch with a large corporation. We're getting offers, like we're being contacted by banks and large corporations as well.
Well, that brings us to being here, which is nonetheless quite outstanding because this is one event, but I've followed a cycle of conferences called Sharing the World at Expo, and that also has been really about sharing a lot of great knowledge, people who are witnessing and who are actors of an economy that clearly has huge differences and incongruences possibly with this form of economy that we know. Now you are, in a way, Luis, the bridge, because your purpose is education, and so how are you bridging your transition in your role? And we can't ask you how you're doing it as an ambassador because you just became one yesterday, but
Exactly.
how do you plan on putting your experience to target this goal?
Right. Let me start by asking a question. Who in the audience is below 20 years old? Right? No one. That means that we are not...
Go up to 21 because we do have...
No, I said 20, and they said 20 for a reason. That means that all of us witnessed the birth of Internet. Internet was born in our lifetime, but it was pre-existent to the birth of every child who is nowadays in a school. So it's a precondition for their lives. Not just that, Facebook was founded before any of those students entered the primary school as well, which means that they have grown in a world that's completely different from the world we knew as children. That said, if we look at our educational systems, both in Italy, with the maturità, in Spain, with the selectividad, and so many others, we still ask students to learn and to do what we had to do when we were students.
Not only.
Our parents, well, possibly, possibly, but at least what we did, which in my view does not make much sense, because in one of the previous lectures we were told how design had to take advantage of consumers' habits and had to shape the habits as well. But that's possible because of the tools that nowadays exist that did not, that were not there when we were students. So, at which extent are we preparing our students to the world, for the world they will live in, instead of preparing them for the world we lived or we grew in? I think that's a question we should all ask ourselves and bear in mind, because the consequences can be very important if we accept that the world is accelerating exponentially, and right Kurzweil and Singularity University have been mentioned here a few times today. We need to be aware that a 10-year delay 20 years ago meant something very different from a 10-year delay from now to 2025. So we really need to ask ourselves a question. What are we doing in our school in Sevilla? For example, we just created what we call the Exponential Entrepreneurship Program, and we are bringing experts to share with the students their views on the global challenges the world has, and then we're going to expose them to technology lectures. And they know now that on June the 2nd, 2016, they will have to present in front of a public audience their company projects using technology, and they will have to get investors, and that will be the highest mark they can get. Of course, at the same time, we need to comply with the Spanish regulation for the educational system. How we do that is a little bit of a longer story.
So I'll play the devil's advocate for a moment. Is there any concern on behalf of you and you that in this acceleration to find the right solutions, we might leave behind some pieces of knowledge which are quite important in creating the building blocks of an aware, sentient human being? Because I was in Silicon Valley last year asking people about this, amongst other things, and one answer was, well, we don't need to be teaching children history, do we, anymore? I mean, everything is available on the web. Well, that touch, you know, that touch culture is quite different from unveiling the many layers of knowledge. So do we not risk simplifying the process too much? You go in the order that whoever has the burning answer first may go.
Okay, so I completely agree. I think not only we are risking losing those pieces of information, I think we are already losing those pieces of information. Yeah, I think any highly accelerated exponential process need to be taken with as much care as possible, and yet many things will be left out because it is accelerating in such a pace. So I think much of the responsibility for us building that kind of process is to be considerate about those parameters as much as possible. And also, I have to admit that, I mean, I think we're standing in front of a singularity, and I think nobody really understands what is beyond the singularity. I mean, everybody can, well, not everybody, but even those people are like deeply participating in the process, maybe they can see the way to the singularity, but I don't think anyone realizes what is beyond that and how society looks like. So it's also very hard to predict what needs to be preserved and what needs to be put aside. But I would say making people human, or making people considerate, or making people self-aware is generally believed to be good things, irrespective of their resulting process, the end point.
That leads me to the next question, but first let's hear the answer to the previous.
Thanks. I think that we can't get rid of a basic layers in terms of cultures, in terms of the so-called traditional material, because it's a big discussion within the school about if Latin it's an important layer of the culture of a student, or is something really old to replace with I don't know, something related to technology and so on. I think the real thing is how to connect this layer, this traditional layer, and give them new meanings related to these exponential changes. That's I think really important. The connection, and to give sense to this type of traditional approach means first of all to rethink the ways in which we used to teach our students. It's a problem of teacher, faculty. It's a way to reorient them toward the new ways. And it's not only a matter of technology. It's really important, but this is one of the things. It's a connection, the real thing. I know a lot of really brilliant teachers in Italy that are doing so. They have to deal with a traditional school, really rigid, that is against this type of approach. But they are succeeding and collecting a lot of important insight and results with their students, because the real thing is to use the ability of a teacher to transfer his knowledge, but on the other hand, to deal with the technologies in an intelligent way. Not only new electronic board or something like this that are not useful in this approach.
Can I just add in one more thing? I think while as we have a lot of crises all over industries and verticals, I think the educational system, more than anything else, is in a deep crisis. And I actually truly believe that decentralization may also be the solution for that.
Let me make a couple of considerations. When I was at school, there was something called the Berlin Wall, right? Children need to be taught that existed because it's prehistorical for them. They were not born when the Berlin Wall was knocked down. So yes, of course, we need to teach history and art and literature and all of those things. But above all, I think we need to light up the passion for that, so that humans, no matter their age, keep learning about it through their lifetimes. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, yes, there is a risk. Of course, there's a risk of leaving behind, aside, or forgetting important things. But that works in both ways. We may leave aside things important from the past, but we also risk not taking into account the important points about the future. And I am not going to choose which of both is more dangerous. So in times of change, or in change of times like ours, what I have realized, and it's a personal opinion, that we really need to achieve is to learn how to navigate uncertainty. Because there is uncertainty. There will be more and more uncertainty. And the important thing for me is to how to deal with that, because uncertainty will be there.
That doesn't work anymore, but we have others. That actually, by experience, I find that happens more in the realm of the spirit than, really. Embracing unconsciousness means, embracing uncertainty means letting go of a lot of set beliefs that are imposed to us and that are fed into our systems from families, from society. So it's a holistic approach, and that's why the beauty of this network is that it can bring such diversity and intelligence that you're not excluding one in favor of the other. We're in a time of and rather than or. But this idea of, therefore, well, in terms of education, because now I have 10 questions lining up in my brain, but engaging younger people or engaging people who are so exposed to the very quick pace of social media is very difficult. So I've asked many people who teach, for example, how that has changed. And it'd be interesting to hear your experiences on, even if not in the classroom, at home. I mean, how many parents are in this room? Maybe not too many, good some. Do you find it difficult to engage with your offspring because the pace of the information that they're getting from their devices is so much sexier than what mom and dad have to say? There's a bigger and bigger divide there, and that requires a lot of creative thinking on behalf of human-to-human communication. But any experiences in this field to share?
Let me make a consideration. Any of us who has seen a child or a teenager in front of a video game, do we think the video game has much problem to engage the child? No, which means that it's not that it is impossible to get them engaged. The point is that we need to give them the right challenges for them to be engaged.
Give me an example, please.
I will. I can give you probably a few. A few years ago, we in my school started teaching with computers and mobile devices connected to the internet. I'm a chemistry teacher. I stopped teaching them the gas laws. I gave them the equipment and asked them to find out how gas behaved and which laws conducted it. It's the other way around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Roberto?
I agree. As I mentioned, I think it's a matter of how we design the challenges to the young generation, because we tend to say that they are multitasking, they are a lot of things. I think I don't believe to this idea of multitasking, because I think that first of all, it's a problem of attention. Attention is the really scarcest resources we have, not only with the young generation. And today we have to deal with this idea of design of the attention. And one of the most important things is that designing challenges to relate something really concrete with their intelligence, ability, freshness, ability to deal with the technologies. I think this is the real point. The rest is gaming, but so unfocused.
Yeah, actually, I agree with this challenge. I mean, I think the level, the threshold of attention, or the threshold of signal that need to be sent for agents, for little agents or for little angels, in order to attend that signal is growing, and that's worrying, I think. So on one hand, we are producing much more efficient information processors in a way, but there is the fear that we are paying with something, so something else is being damaged, or maybe just, some parts of the brain is getting larger and some other parts of the brain is getting smaller or less being used. So I think attention is the key word here. I think the question is how to keep practicing the right attention within this process, this evolutionary process.
We're talking so much about connecting areas of knowledge, connecting parts of our brain. Connecting is really one of the key words of our time. When we weren't connecting through these with the help and the intermediation of these things, we were using our human resources to a greater degree, though. So how do you see this transition that we're in, for example, enabling people, encouraging people to engage, such as your case or your case, and on the other hand, seeing those engaged, and so what about all those people who kind of seem dormant? Is society just going to forget about them?
Well, I hope not, but I have to say, to admit one thing. So different periods in histories were kind of encouraging and leveraging different qualities. So in some periods of history, if you were, physically powerful, you were dominating. In some other, if you were maybe more tricky or more charismatic, you were becoming dominating. And I think we are entering a new period where something else will be a criteria to be dominating. Yeah, and maybe that's like entrepreneurship or activeness, maybe. Still, I hope that it doesn't mean that the rest are, discarded. But it does mean that we are changing our priorities in a sense, and we can always re-ask ourselves if we can change that, or should we change that, or.
I think that the word networking and connection, talking about learning, is one of the key words, because if we consider that our learning is made up more or less the 20% by formal training, formal activity. The 70, the 80% is made up of informal. It's made up conversation. It's made up networking, mutual support. And in my job, it's a complication because we can't measure the informal learning in a traditional manner. We can't open cameras and a microphone to record the conversation. In our idea, we have to provide expression territories to give people the opportunity not only to conversate, because it's not only a matter of new internal social network. I don't believe about the effectiveness of a community online in a traditional manner, but we have to blend, to embed this type of approach and technologies in the day-by-day activities. And in these activities, training and learning is a part of these elements. That's the reason why we have to consider learning a social process. It's not only a one way. We invest a lot of things, but the most important things for us is the social learning platform and activities we are working on. Because there we discover day by day the real skills and the real competence of our people. And that's a really important thing in terms of economic value in the perspective.
You speak about connectivity. There's a wonderful book by Jared Diamond called Arms, Germs and Steel that tells the story of humanity until 1,000 years ago, and no, less than that, and explains how the contact between humans and cattle, when cattle breeding started, led to viruses and bacteria being transmitted and so on. So we've been increasing our connectivity to the entire world through history from the very beginning. And now we are producing all kinds of devices in an exponential trend. So my point about that would be, this is the world we have, and that is the world we're going to have. So we'd better adapt to it, otherwise we will be extinct. So that's the answer to the first question. Concerning the second question, those individuals who are kind of passive, if you want, I think that at least in the Western world, we've been very much under the influence of the idea that work, profession, is a divine punishment. And that has harmed us a lot. I can conceive a few things that are more engaging than a passion for your profession. So I think we need to completely change the approach and stop saying that working, that having a profession, that doing things professionally is a punishment, and make every individual understand that it is the opportunity to have the best kind, the most engaged, and the most creative type of life. And if we do that, I think we will decrease the risk of having that kind of situations.
Curious, by the way, Jared Diamond is speaking tomorrow, guest of Intesa San Paolo in Milano to close the session of the Sharing the World. Just a funny coincidence. And there are a number of other coincidences, and they kind of emerge spontaneously when you create a good flow of communication. Nearing towards the end, if there are burning questions, obviously, I think our speakers would love to take them. But how would you prioritize? Because prioritizing is kind of essential in creating roadmaps. The elements. So we have sustainability, which is a channel that we need to go through. But how much is it perceived as a priority in the scheme of things, in your perspective? And then we have social. I mean, they're all so connected, but we need to prioritize in order to decide which ones to act upon first. And we're always, the theme is we're transitioning. So we're moving into a time where what we put out as an order of priority, it then becomes our set of golden rules. Not that they will evolve in order, necessarily in relation to our priorities, but that's the way we deliver them.
Why would you want to rule how each individual needs to prioritize?
No, I was...
change.
Okay, so you're saying tap into the free flow of thought and see what priorities emerge. Have you...
For each individual,
sure,
which will be different from one to another.
But we do have some orders of priority as a society, as a human society on this planet, don't you think?
Yes, poverty, food, water, education, health. That said,
possibly some can be addressed across the board and not necessarily vertically.
I think that facing this type of basic needs means a different way to consider the rules of the enterprises. It is not only corporate social responsibility, it is a really important thing, but to how to relate to this type of issues with the core business, with the main business. That means to think about the future business in a different way. It doesn't mean to transform our bank in a foundation. This is not the key question. Is how to relate with this type of needs. For instance, jobs, employability for Italy is really a big question. And the question for us is how we can contribute, not only to hiring new people and to reduce this type of gap, but how to create the condition to increase the employability, to increase the ability of all the young generation to face these huge challenges with an entrepreneurial mindset. That's really important. That doesn't mean to invite them to found new startups. It's not this question. It's how to face their future job, to face the company that they hope to be hired with an entrepreneurial approach. That means to take advantage of their real competencies, to, let me say, sell their real competencies. That's to analyze the business case, analyze the market. And doing so, we, in the latest year, we launched more than one initiative about that. Also using training, for instance, but not a startup school with the 5 steps to write a business plan. This is not the thing. It's how to transfer not only the patient to find a job in a really difficult moment, but how to take advantage from some simple approach, simple technique, taking advantage from their skills. I think this is one of the roles that all the companies has to play, reimagining their role, maintaining their core business, but with a larger view than in the past.
And simplifying, that's a key word to take home.
So for me, I think at the end of the day, everything that we talk about is just an evolution. We're seeing and foreseeing a rapid evolution, which basically make us an improved operating system. In a way, I think we are becoming from many linear processors into parallel processor. And for me, in this evolution, for me, sustainability is a guiding principle. So it's where we should intervene and on evolution and lead it to the point where we want to head. Said that, someone just told me a joke about sustainability. He said that there is a consultant and he's asking a guy how is the relationship for him and his wife, and he says, well, it is sustainable, we will survive. Which means that, I mean, at the end, we have the tendency not just to be sustainable, we have the tendency to grow and improve. And the puzzle, or at least sustainability for me, is how to grow in one dimension without destroying completely other important dimensions.
And it's not about surviving, it's about living. I mean, that's
exactly.
Any questions, observations, stories, moments? Did we get any news from the web? No. In the sense that...
Thank you very much. So we are here thanks to Paolo Marenco and Silicon Valley Study Tour, as you said. But I think it doesn't exist a bridge between universities and student universities and the job world. We have in front of us a director of a school and a manager of a bank. So it's the perfect question, the perfect situation for to ask this to you. Why there isn't a bridge between universities and the job world now?
And I can also testify on that, because I spent more than the last decades in the academy, and now fully spending in the industry, and I completely agree. So I'm serving as such a bridge, but I think we're lacking that bridge a lot.
I think that the main point is because we aren't able to give up our control. We have give up our I don't know, confidence about our role. That's the problem, because we continue to say that the university and companies has to relate, conversate, collaborate, but we are collaborating in a formal way, I think. That's the reason why I say we have to give up the control. We have to invade the other part, and vice versa. It's not easy, because I think university is really tough and really strong institutions, like bank are strong institutions. And each of us tend to say, but you can't consider our problem, you can't consider our characteristics, and vice versa. And the real thing is to give up the control, to invade the other territories, to find a unique point by project, by challenge, by things we can do together, accepting the idea of the mistake, as David mentioned before. Because, as I said, the mistake is a terrible word for a bank, because we are regulated. But working on mistakes is really important. It's really, really important. And in that sense, we have to learn a lot. Also, participate in a conference like this.
I would start by making this consideration. Which company can survive without paying close attention to their market? And opposite to it, which university or which school needs to pay real attention to the market? Because at least in Europe, most of them are subsidized by the state. It's lifelong positions, life positions for the teachers and professors, and they really don't need to care so much about that. It's not exactly the case in some of the universities in the US, for example, and in some in the UK as well, which have a far stronger interaction between the corporate and the academic world. So there is no bridge, probably because they have different patterns. They are financed or funded in a different way, and consequently they have different scopes. And you need very unique institutions to try and get out of their comfort zone and explore what the other world is doing. Is that reasonable? Reasonable? No. Is that understandable? Yes. Now, you youth should also help us to change this.
Can I just add one more comment on that?
Absolutely.
So I'm not going to answer the question, but just hinting about some relation. So there is a famous, brilliant physicist named Geoffrey West, which has researched social physics. So the physics of networks, the physics of cities, the physics of societies, and he came to really amazing results, which he could actually test on real data to amazing accuracy. And then he could also prove that, like analytically, why is that and that. So, for example, one fact that he could have proved and also test on databases is that the fact that universities never die. And indeed, universities never die. It's true. There are universities like 1,000-year-old. Whereas he could also prove that companies has to die. And every company has a lifespan which you can actually predict. And you can actually see the graphs fit perfectly, you know, the growth and then the ceasing. So they really have different, as you say, like different modes or whatever. And on the other hand, companies that are dying also have the ability to grow that the academy doesn't have. So there is an interesting interplay between those two institutions and how they at least should maybe cooperate more.
We have a question.
Thank you. My question is about the death, not just of one university, but of the concept of university itself. Speaking about decentralization of knowledge and of education, we have phenomena like homeschooling, unschooling going on, also before internet culture spread in the world. Do you agree with me that in many conventions, many people are quite admitting the possibility of the death of banking system, the death of corporation as we know them, but there is a lot of fear thinking about the end of the school, the centralized school concept, the centralized university concept. Even here, when Luis and others talked about innovation in the way of teaching, saying very meaningful things, we were all thinking about how to central plan a new way of educate. I don't think that we were so ready to discuss a real decentralization of information and education transmission, like in the way we were talking about medicine decentralization and the end of hospitals.
Absolutely. Yeah. I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I think that's just part of that evolution from linear process to parallel process. I just don't think about it as the death of education. I see that as the evolvement of education, and I'm absolutely convinced that education will be decentralized and will shift to a completely new paradigm or a new notion of education.
I partly agree and I partly don't. Concerning, if you want, higher education, 18-year plus, I think it's pretty decentralized already. Look at what we were just told. 1.3 million days of training done by the bank, which is not a university. So a lot of current training, current education nowadays is already taking place outside centralized, if you want, institutions. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, if we go to the -18 age range, I would like to draw your attention upon a point which has little to do with academy and much to do with the human nature. From the age of 3 up to 18, what we are trying to do is to socialize the individual. They need to learn how to cooperate. They need to learn how to understand and how to bear each other. And that is not something you can easily do through a computer or through home schooling. I think that's one of the worst side effects of homeschooling, that they're not learning to deal with each other. And that's, for me, is absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that, because the role of media, I mean, of technologies on that age group is really delicate, I think. And I see more and more, because it can be education, but also entertainment, more and more backseat cars. You know, I mean, how many now have a slot for the iPad? You know, it's kind of scary. I mean, that's close to anesthetizing your kid when you're traveling with them. Anyway, this could open another conversation, but we don't have time. We have time for one more question.
Okay, last quick question. As one of our panelists just said, like, the internet came into the world like last 20 years. But what about the youth that resides in like South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, which does not have even the basic necessity to access to internet? And there are like stakeholders
like tomorrow, they make a population, they make an impact. Like if Google can have a CEO from there, so why not we could have a brilliant mind from there, at least giving them the opportunity to access the basic necessity like water. For me, today it's like internet. So I would love to take your views, especially you, Metin. I would love to. Because it's changing our world, and there are a community which don't have the basic necessity yet. So how are we going to balance the whole world like this?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think part of the power that we generate in this new technology is also the mean to solve all problems. So I think that's why I think actually I see a lot of promise in those decentralized environmental network and decentralized social network as well. Social, not in the sense of Facebook, but actually taking care for social needs. We are in touch with startups about that, by the way. So I think, on one hand, I think we actually will be able to improve on this a lot. And on the other hand, I just want to comment that sometimes these societies can just jump to the next stage without going through the previous one. For example, just one example in Africa. So when people try to bring cellular phones, and then the reaction was, "Are you crazy? There is not even landlines there." And what happened is actually they really adopted cell phones. They just jumped over landlines directly to cell phones. So in that sense, that's just another, side of the coin.
Let's hope.
Any other answers? I think it'll be an interesting reshuffling of society, because those who have been kind of, who have let themselves, who have become complacent with abundance and who are not stimulated to act, are probably going to dissipate when all those hungry, really bright people will join the global conversation. So I think it'll be a fascinating, scary, but probably fascinating turnover. And if all these predictions are true, it could be much sooner than we believe. In fact, look at how quickly things change. We had the beautiful Alps in the horizon, and now we're in a cloud. So, exactly. It's fog, yes, but I mean, it looks like a cloud. Any more words, thoughts? That's it? Well, I think we might need our host of the day back here saying, David? I think we need you up here to just give a final farewell. And meanwhile, it's been a great honor for me to listen and be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you